Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us at our weekly morning meeting. We are really, really lucky today to have some great state representatives who are champions for kids joining us today. So I don't want to take up any of the time because I know you all want to hear directly from them. So I'll go ahead and first introduce our friend Representative Andrea White. Thank you for being here this very busy lame duck session. Representative White is serving her second term in the House right now. She was just reelected to her third term. Congratulations
Thank you.
from Kettering. And so she represents Montgomery County, the 36th district. I see Representative Isaacsohn joining right now. And Representative White has been an absolute champion for Ohio's youngest kids. She brings a vast wealth of experience from the private sector to this work. She owned a small business that provided communications and process improvement consulting services for over 15 years before she served in the House. She was a project coordinator for a statewide organization supporting folks with developmental disabilities. She's worked in early intervention, so she knows our work from a firsthand experience as well. And I could go on and on about all of the wonderful things she's done at the local level and now brings to the State House, but I want to make sure you get to hear from her. And thank you, Representative Isaacsohn, for joining us as well. I see you might be traveling, so please be safe in the car.
Hi, everyone. I'm pulled over. Don't worry. I'm parked.
Wonderful.
I'm not driving.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Representative Isaacsohn. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Rep. White. She'll speak with our folks for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then I'll transition to you, Rep. Isaacsohn, and I'll make sure I get to give your actual formal bio before we jump into your remarks as well.
Okay.
And with that, I'll kick it over to you, Representative White.
And Brittany, I want to make sure, because my understanding of what you wanted me to talk about, I want you to just give me a recap because I want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
Priorities, what I want to work on in the new year type thing.
You got it. Yeah, a lame duck update would be super helpful. I know a lot of folks have been closely tracking House Bill 7 and appreciated your leadership on that. And the bill has moved really quickly the last couple of weeks. And then absolutely what your priorities are coming into the new year too would be great.
Okay, got it.
Thanks, Rep. White.
So let me just start by saying I appreciate all of you and all of your work. You're on the front lines every day trying to advocate for our youngest citizens and their parents and mothers and fathers and guardians and grandparents and everybody else. So thank you all for the important work you do. Your work informs my work, right? And you guys are so helpful in shaping policy. I love hearing from you, and I welcome any opportunities to get more of your great ideas. So I guess right now we had high hopes for House Bill 7. We introduced it in, Representative Latina Humphrey and myself introduced it early last year. And we tried to get all of the separate, I worked very closely with Groundwork and a lot of the prenatal to 3 Vanderbilt national studies, the National Conference of State Legislators, all these different entities that had great ideas. We tried to do, what can we do to truly show that this takes a multi-pronged approach? So we were able to get the doula coverage for Medicaid in the budget, as well as the 0 to 3 continuous Medicaid coverage. I will tell you, Medicaid hasn't implemented that yet. And we are pushing to find out why is that not happening? And so there's some difference of opinion of why it's not happening, but we need to continue to press on that. So then, because of the chaos of this General Assembly, I'll just say that, we were able to get House Bill 7 through the House in late spring, May, June area. I think it was late May or sometime in June before our last session. We got it passed with $34 million of funding in it. So then you have the huge break of the summer and the election cycle. And so here we are now with relatively, 6 to 8 weeks before a new budget process begins. And I completely understand the Senate's perspective. We can't spend $34 million. We don't know. What is the governor proposing? How is your work fitting in, even though we have worked very closely with Department of Children and Youth, as well as JFS and health and other entities. So what we have done is basically stripped out the money and kept the policy changes. So I see Kim Tice on here. One of the recommendations from the Child Care Study Committee, and I don't know if anyone from Head Start's on, I can't see all the names, but basically one of the Child Care Study Committee recommendations that I co-chaired with Senator Serino last General Assembly was, why don't we take these entities that have these certifications already, like the Head Start performance standards, you're meeting all that, NAEYC, accreditation, and try to do a crosswalk between what the step up to quality standards are for our tiered system. So if you have these accreditations, you meet tier 3 or whatever, you know, the gold or whatever it's going to come in at, the DC-wide determines, so you can eliminate the duplication of paperwork and administrative burden and still participate in our state's quality system. So reducing the administrative hurdles. So this is in fact still in House Bill 7. I found out from the Department of Health that they got a $10 million grant to try to start implementing modernizing WIC. And so they have plans for a 2-phase approach. One is to basically get the online system, and they're going to be using an outside, existing third-party vendor is the proposal now. And so they are going to try to get the online system, and then there's going to be a phase 2. So there may be need for additional money in the future, but what we changed it to was basically, okay, I mean, it's taken them a long time. And I know they have to meet federal bureaucracy and go through checklists and all that. But as a legislature, we need to know what they're doing and keep it in front of us so that the needs of families for nutrition and hunger remain in front of policymakers. So basically what we've changed it to is, okay, you need to give us an update quarterly of what you're doing. Within 90 days of the bill passing, we need to know what are all the options for modernization and what are you doing quarterly and how many more women and children are we serving for the next 2 years. So we are staying on top of what's happening. And then if additional funding is needed, the legislature is more aware and tuned into the needs. We also kept in the policy making related to collaboration, process improvement, you know, communication across the agencies, and then the DC codes for 0 to 5 mental health is probably the biggest, in my mind, the biggest thing that's still in there, that Medicaid must develop codes within for the true 0 to 5 mental health classifications for the DCS codes, rather than using adult and older youth codes for things. There's such a clearer micro determination of these needs, and it will help the children get better care, perhaps attract more providers to the space, and start early rather than having to later have more intensive problems. So that's kind of a nutshell. You can see the sub-bill on the Finance Committee website or contact my office if you would like a copy. We are hopeful that the fact that they're still having hearings means they're going to pass it, and I'm following up with the chair today actually to see what the plan is. Another bill that you may be interested in is 583, and that is the it's the group homes bill for foster children. So in the Montgomery County area, there is over 83 providers, and they could have multiple homes. There's only 242 providers in the entire state. So basically children from the foster care system, when they can't find a foster home, are placed in a group home. Or children remanded from the juvenile court system, instead of going into detention, they are putting them into the custody of children's services agencies across the state. And then they have to find placements for these kids. So Representative Plummer and myself have been working on this bill. We are working very hard to try to, we are working really hard to try to get this bill through in some way or another. To get a study committee on how they're mixing the children between juvenile system and kids abused and neglected, mixed in with juvenile kids. How do we incentivize more homes around the state so that if we want reunification, these kids are closer? Now, most of these are older kids, not in the young children's space. The other bills I have that you may be interested in are the childcare related bills. I have 5 childcare bills. Representative Isaacsohn has a great one that I also was about to introduce, but he already had it going. And so we want to get more people engaged in this space. And I'm thrilled that he's so very interested and active in this space. So Representative Romer and I myself have a bill to do public-private partnerships. And we're hoping, we really introduced all these bills to get the discussion and lay the groundwork for next year, because all of them have some sort of money in them. But this would be a $10 million grant to incentivize employers to work with other employers or give incentives to their employees, right? So that if you have, then you could get a tax credit. So there's the public-private partnerships bill to incentivize on-site or near-site childcare. We have a tax credit bill for employers that matches the federal tax credit, but makes it higher. So right now there's an $125,000 tax credit for employers on the federal level if they're doing childcare benefits for their employees, and it's kind of limited. We have a $500,000 that can be carried over 5 years, and this is to incentivize employers giving more benefits for childcare, perhaps doing on-site or near-site, or however they meet the criteria, and then they can get a tax credit for it. And then I didn't know this, but we have gotten rid of the CAT tax for a lot of the smaller employers, but you can actually sell tax credits to larger companies. So I didn't know this, but there's some benefit around that. So that's one bill. We have a tax credit for families of $3,000 per child, $6,000 per family, to have a tax credit on their state taxes. And then I have a foster care with Representative Ray. So Representative Romer and I are working on the public-private partnerships. Representative Abrams and I are working on the federal tax credit match the state, have a state tax credit. Representative Ray and I are working on a foster care or long-term kinship care that you would categorically eligible for childcare, publicly funded childcare, because one of the biggest reasons families don't take children is they can't afford the childcare. So at this moment in time, I'm trying to remember what my other bill is related to childcare. But anyway, so if I look ahead to next year, I am committed to try to get all of the policies that we still think are relevant and important in House Bill 7 reintroduced in the new General Assembly. I'm particularly if we know that the #1 population in homeless shelters of children is infants, we have got to do more to help our pregnant, homeless women and newborns and young children. And so Healthy Beginnings at Home is still in the pilot stage. We're trying to get a Medicaid waiver for that. I am committed to pushing that. I'm not sure, it doesn't look like the administration put as much money towards that in the proposal for their budget, but I am committed to that initiative and will continue to push that. So there's several initiatives in that didn't get funded that we're going to keep pushing. I'm also committed to the childcare space. One exciting thing we got through that was voted on the House floor yesterday is House Bill 312. It was incorporated into the big omnibus amendment to Senate Bill 208 in primary and secondary education. What 312 is if any of you know what Learn to Earn Dayton is, or any of the Cradle to Career networks around the state. So Ohio has a goal of 65% credential attainment, because we need, first of all, for people to have the skills they need to support themselves and their families, but also for our state to have the workforce that we need for the future. So right now we have business advisory councils that work with high schools and middle schools, businesses that get engaged with, career opportunities, internships. But guess what? If you can't read, if you can't do math, if you're not ready for kindergarten, your chances of being ready for an internship in high school are greatly reduced. Graduation path greatly reduced. So Cradle to Career networks or regional education partnerships say, what do we need to do to get to post-high school credential attainment of 65%, and work backwards on the following metrics: kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, graduation, post-high school career attainment, FAFSA completion, and a few others. And they're part of a national network, but I'm going to quickly do this and then you can have the rest of the time. I'm going to stop. But anyway, we got it passed. We had 4, we incentivized in late 21, and we now had 10. And so it now got put in the Department of Education and Workforce as a permanent thing that they will foster and grow around the state, because it's going to help with kindergarten readiness, etc. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much. And as you can all see, Representative White reads everything we send her, all of us. She does the homework. She knows this stuff at a really granular level. And I've learned so much from her this year, and really appreciate your ongoing leadership on all of these many topics that touch young children. And if you could stick around for a couple more minutes in case we have questions, I would welcome folks to just go ahead and put things in the chat. I do want to introduce Representative Dani Isaacsohn. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Representative Isaacsohn is from the Ohio 24th House District, which represents almost half of the city of Cincinnati. And he is also serving as the minority whip and was just reelected to that role unofficially, but will become official again in January for his caucus coming into the 136th General Assembly. And he also is very committed to fighting for a world-class public education system. One of the things we reached out to Representative Isaacsohn to chat about this morning is House Bill 570. We're really excited. That's the categorical eligibility bill that Rep. White mentioned earlier. That's something that has lots of bipartisan support. So thank you for your leadership on that space and always bringing up the many intersections of barriers facing young children and families, Rep. Isaacsohn. And thanks for being here this morning to chat a little bit more about lame duck and what you see coming down the pike for us in the 136th.
Thanks so much, Brittany. And I'll just, first of all, I want to echo what Representative White said about just thanking all the people on this call and particularly Groundwork for your leadership in this space. I am better from like day one. Groundwork was there to sort of help me be better at this job. I told them what I cared about, but it was Groundwork that was like, well, if you care about these things, you know, here's some ways to think about it, and here's some ways to get plugged in. Oh, and by the way, there's a representative in the legislature who is already clearly the leader on these issues, and that's Representative White. And so I do also want to shout out how grateful I am that Representative White always leads on these issues, at least, you know, in the 2 years I've been in the legislature, and everyone knows it, right? Across the whole House, you know, if there is an issue in this space, not only does Representative White probably care about it the most, but knows the most about it, knows which legislation is where. When I went, you know, when I went to talk to her about 570 and making childcare free for childcare providers or publicly funded, she was like, "Oh, you have that in the works. Great." It was on my list of 10, you know, of 10 pieces of legislation that we needed to advance in this space. And so I'm happy to talk about that bill, but I want to frame it in sort of a larger conversation around how I'm thinking about, as whip in particular, what the legislative strategy looks like for Democrats and for the caucus next General Assembly, how we are going to try and be like a value, even given our sort of minority status. And first, just by way of a little bit of background, because I think it's relevant certainly for the work Groundwork does. Before this job, I started and ran an organization called Cohere in Cincinnati and Columbus, based on the premise that people who live the issues every day are experts. And that if you want to make better policy, you need to listen to and learn from the everyday experts, right? If you want to address bullying in schools, the superintendent needs to sit down and talk to kids getting bullied. If the head of Metro or CODA in Columbus, if the head of the transit authority wants to figure out why seniors are not riding the bus anymore, you should talk to seniors from hard to reach populations about why they're not riding the bus anymore, right? And so the same is true certainly in these spaces, and I know that principle infuses what Groundwork does. So it's how I try and do this work. And within childcare, you know, you talk to childcare providers, and I've visited a lot of providers across Cincinnati, and these are I'm of the age where a lot of my friends have young kids. They're telling me about signing up and trying to find childcare and what it's like. And I've done a lot of focus groups through Cohere with parents. And then you go to visit these spaces that everyone's trying to get into, and they're closing. They're closing facilities despite wait lists that people try and get on their list before they're even born. And so clearly the market is failing, right? The childcare market that we have developed is not working. And so that is fundamentally a supply and demand issue. And one of the things I'm trying to work with our caucus on is, what does it look like to focus on our progressive values and priorities: access to childcare, access to healthcare, access to economic opportunities, access to housing, in a way that recognizes that we can't just focus on demand, on helping people pay for things. There has to be a supply focus too. And I didn't come up with this, but supply side progressivism, I think, is certainly something that I think is having it should have its moment, because we need to be focused on helping childcare providers develop the supply. That's both space and having the actual staff. And on the staff piece, I think the most successful policy that I've seen is providing childcare for childcare providers. And Kentucky did it with their ARPA dollars and then decided to keep it going. And Cincinnati has such an interesting example of why this is valuable, because the YMCA operates childcare facilities on both sides of the river. And so I shared the CEO of the YMCA's testimony when I introduced this bill last week, because he says it's night and day. In Kentucky, they're expanding. They have higher retention. They're able to grow what they're doing. They have the staff turnover, staff are happier. They're getting higher qualified staff. In Cincinnati, they're closing. They're getting smaller. And he attributes it to, this is the difference in this specific law. And so we have this real world example. Okay, let's act on it. I love that there's this tri-share public-private partnership, because we have to think outside the box in Ohio, where this is not Connecticut. We're not going to get to do, kind of what they're doing. So it's being piloted in Hamilton County and Cincinnati. Here's hoping that pilot, shows the results. I think it will. But if it doesn't, then we need to come up with a different form of public-private partnership that we want to test. Right. And so that's sort of the second thing I want to focus on is so one, I think particularly Democrats need to be thinking about how can we be supply side progressives, right? How can we focus on helping fix the marketplace? I'm thinking about this in childcare, but also I have a housing supply bill that just passed out of committee. So really trying to think about this in the housing space as well. But then also, what can we do to, and Representative White touched on this, what can we do to clean up or make government work better, right? Without adding cost, without adding money, what are we doing to fix the ways in which government doesn't work? And the best way to get at that is to talk to the everyday experts. Go and meet with the people living this every day and have them explain to you what doesn't make sense. Because I can't tell you how many, community focus group discussions I was in where people were like, you know why I didn't sign up for that? Because you have to go to 3 different buildings in the same day that are not next to each other. And so, yes, it was a well-intended, thing that was set up, but I actually couldn't access it for practical reasons. And the only way to fix that is to go and talk to people about what is going on in the day-to-day that is not working, that doesn't make sense. And I know that sounds, to quote, I think, an infamous President Obama quote that he got in trouble for, but it sounds like hitting singles and doubles. But from the super minority in our caucus, right, hitting singles and doubles on these really important issues, that's to me, that is our job, and helping the legislature try and do that. And very oddly, I think by my last count, the Democratic caucus next year will have more attorneys than the Republican caucus. And so I really do think our role then is to try and, look at what are the way the laws are written that are not working, both for the agencies and for the people. And so my ask of Groundwork and of everyone on this call is help us do that. Help us figure out truly what doesn't make sense, what is broken, what is not working. And because some of those things are going to require funding, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them, it's the result of sloppy lawmaking, which we're seeing a lot of in lame duck. A lot of them are the result of just years of things being added on that sort of contradict each other and don't make sense. Some of it, we're not responding to things that, to certain lawsuits. And lastly, and I'm so glad Representative White talked about this, I personally both am very invested in and really focused on what is happening to young people in the juvenile justice system and the foster care system, particularly before they end up as inmates in DYS or DRC, because we know who they're going to be. We know when they're 10, 11, 12, 13. Statistically, we know who the 16, 17, 18, and 19-year-olds are going to be who are in the system. And what are we doing when they're 9, 10, 11, and 12 to intervene? Right now, not nearly enough. And it's like with so many things, being on the preventative side is so much better, easier, cheaper, all the things. But it takes intention and it takes being really thoughtful and putting in the work. And so I will stop there and just, again, reiterate how grateful I am for everyone on this call. And I hope you see us really, truly as partners in how do we think through what progress looks like from any angle, because that's how I think we have to think about it.
So Representative Isaacsohn, are you on this or aware of that Justice Kennedy at the Supreme Court has a task force on this pre-engagement with the justice system?
I'm aware of it. I'm not on it. I would have loved to be, but in fact, I just met with Representative Abrams and Representative Williams to talk through some of these issues.
Yeah, so this is important, and that's the thing. There's a lot of discussion. We need you guys to weigh in on these important things. The other thing I wanted to remind you about, one of the Child Care Study Committee recommendations was, and Robin Lightcap with Preschool Promise was very instrumental in helping get this fixed. If you are getting your training as a high school student, your CDA training, or if you are getting your associate's degree and you work at a child care center, but you have to get an internship or whatever you need to get, practicum, they were making you leave your place of employment. So your place of employment was suffering, and then you had to lose the pay to go finish your credential. Well, we got rid of that hoop. So now you can, and so if everybody doesn't know that, you can stay as a childcare worker and get your experience. If your center meets the criteria, you get that credential for your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree. You also can do that as a high school student getting your CDA or an adult getting your CDA. So if you need more information, I'm sure Groundwork has it, or we can help you with that. But that should not be a hurdle any longer.
Thanks, Rep. White. And thank you so much, Rep. Isaacsohn, for your historic career-long commitment to centering the voices of folks who are impacted by the work that we're all talking about. I know we're really short on time, but I do have one question from someone who's asked this during a couple meetings. And since we have state lawmakers today, I wanted to make sure we bring it up. House Bill 595, which is the universal preschool proposal, I think Rep. Robinson from Solon, I want to say, is the lead sponsor on that. I think it's only gotten one hearing. I don't anticipate it moving this cycle, but if either of you have any thoughts on maybe the legislative outlook for expanding universal preschool options, either in the budget cycle or beyond, would welcome any insights you might have there.
I've spoken with Senator Blessing about this and not that many others. Ultimately, I do think pre-K should be part of the funding formula. I don't know that next General Assembly is when that's going to happen. But I think it has become increasingly clear because of data on early childhood education, right, that it makes no sense to focus so much on 17 and 18-year-olds and so little on 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. In fact, based on the data, the reverse should be true. And so I'm a huge proponent that public education should start much younger. I think in the interim, I do think, and I didn't mention this earlier, I do think there's really important work that can happen on the home-based healthcare, home-based early childhood education front. It is still where most really young kids are, particularly in rural areas and urban areas. I think ESCs could be an interesting partner in that space. Homegrown is an organization out of North Carolina that has done a lot of really interesting partnerships with North Carolina's government agencies to focus on those families. So I think it's I'm supportive of universal pre-K. I think it should be part of the funding formula ultimately. I also think in the shorter term, we need to really be thinking about kids who are in home-based care, and are they getting high quality early childhood education?
Thanks so much for that, Rep. Isaacsohn. And I realize it's 10:01, so I want to be respectful if folks have to hop off. Any parting thoughts from either Rep. Isaacsohn or Rep. White as we look ahead to the last week of session here? We're really appreciative of your time during such a busy session.
My only thought would be keep using your voice, because as Rep. Isaacsohn said, and your families and parents and kids know what is needed. And so the more you speak up with your local officials, your state representatives, your senators, you've got to be able to have a relationship, because they will respond much more to someone in their district who's giving them a face and a story than to some random email they got from some other part of the state that's a form letter, if you have a relationship, you have more of a voice. So that's my only parting thought. And I want to thank Groundwork and everybody else for all the work you do. You help make our jobs have its wind behind the sails. So thank you so much, and you inform our work and keep doing it.
Yeah, thank you all so much for giving us the time and for being such leaders and partners. It really does matter and mean a lot. And you are educating lawmakers who will be on your side. They just don't know genuinely. And so I hope you know that Representative White and I are partners in that work and will continue to be.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate both of you being so accessible and working so hard for kids in the legislature, and hope you all have a safe holiday season and look forward to working with you both in the new General Assembly. Have a great morning, everyone. Thank you.